Hello, my name's Joanna Barrett and I'm here to read another instalment of my books. I'm actually on the second book now. This is Learning from Life. It's one of a trilogy. I have experiences from life, learning from life and lessons from life. And we're starting this one today. I'm going to read the first chapter, which is entitled Salt of the Earth. First of all, I'll just read a précis of a sermon that Maurice gave. He's been going through the Sermon on the Mount. And he gave a sermon concerning the salt of the earth. Jesus does not say you should be the salt of the earth. He says you are the salt. Every Christian is salt of some kind, good or bad. We are the only salt there is. A Christian who has been born again but does not grow and develop the character of Christ is of no use to God. He is saved, but good for nothing. Neither is he of use to the world. God can't use him, and men tread him underfoot. Unsavoury food can be seasoned with salt, but what can season unsavoury salt? If we can't be the preserving factor in the earth, then nothing can. We're the only hope there is. If we lose the character of Christ, then nothing else can bring it back. If the church loses its savour, what can restore the character of Christ to it? In the Bible, the earth always refers to the physical creation. When God created the earth, it was very good. And in Genesis 1, the word earth is always used. In Genesis 6, we read that the earth also was corrupt before God, for all flesh had corrupted his way upon the earth. There are only two things you can do with something corrupt. You can either destroy it or try to preserve it. Salt can be used to stop corruption. It purifies, preserves and seasons. As long as Christians are on the earth, we make the earth more savoury to God. We give taste. We give meaning to the existence of a corrupt earth. Very challenging that, isn't it? So are we salt? Well, on my first trip to Lanzarote, I didn't know what to expect other than it would be hot. After collecting our suitcases from the airport, Maurice and I took a taxi to our apartment and I had a chance to look at the scenery. The black volcanic ash which covered the surface of this island made it look very barren indeed, and there seemed to be no vegetation other than the occasional cactus which sprung up here and there. I reflected upon England, which is so lush and green, and I thank God again for where he'd planted me. Our apartment was pleasant and was one of 8 on a complex which had also housed a small swimming pool beneath our balcony. Maurice and I were very grateful for the opportunity to come to such an exotic place, as personal money when you're in the ministry is very hard to come by. Well, for the first few days we sunbathed, swam and walked and had a really enjoyable and relaxing time. But then one day, someone stopped us in the street and after asking a few questions, invited us to look around another resort and offered us a free radio cassette player and a meal voucher for our trouble. Well, never one to pass up a bargain. I jumped at the opportunity, especially as the resort was situated at the other end of the island, thus giving us more opportunity to sightsee. Well, the next morning, as arranged, a car came to our apartment to pick us up and take us to the holiday resort, and we were given a conducted tour. The complex was lovely, and we were very impressed with both the mature gardens and the huge swimming pool. Our guide ushered us to a table, ordered drinks, and began to talk to us about the timeshare scheme. He asked us lots of questions, and one of which was, "What's your occupation?" Well, on hearing Maurice's answer, that he was a Bible teacher, we embarked on an incredibly stimulating conversation about God, church, values, and so many other things. And our guide ended up sharing his life and all the problems that he had kept bottled up inside for such a long time. He confessed to us that this job provided him with an escape, as on a holiday island he could live in a fantasy world instead of reality. Well, we had a wonderful time of interaction together with him, which started off a really good friendship. When he found out that I was a singer, he invited us both to a barbecue that they were holding that evening on the complex. There would be food, drink, entertainment provided. And he then wanted us to meet his manager, whom he said had once been a man of the cloth himself. Well, as soon as we walked through the manager's door, Maurice felt sure that this man had been a Roman Catholic priest. He just looked the part. Black trousers, black shirt. The only thing that was missing was the white dog collar. But we couldn't have been more wrong. During the course of our animated conversation, we found out that this man had once been an Elim minister who, after leaving his pastorate, had now found his vocation working for timeshare. He said he had far more opportunities to speak to people about God here than he ever had in church before. Well, as soon as he found out that I was a singer, he earnestly begged me to sing at a barbecue that they were hosting that evening. He even had a special request. He asked me to sing Amazing Grace. Well, to be honest, I wasn't enamoured with his plea. I hadn't come away on holiday to minister, and therefore I had no backing tapes with me, so I was totally unprepared. I was also informed that there wasn't even a piano on site, so it meant singing the song without any musical backing whatsoever. Well, the men kept pressing me and urging me, and in the end I gave in, thinking to myself that nobody knew me, so it didn't really make any difference. Maurice and I were, however, very grateful for the invitation to the barbecue because we'd never have been able to afford this ourselves. It meant that we could have an extra treat to the one that we'd already planned for the end of the holiday. Well, true to their word, they sent a vehicle around to our apartment to collect us later in the evening, which took us to the barbecue. The place was milling with people. There was a bar and a restaurant which was packed full, and the overspill of people went out onto the balcony. The place was obviously buzzing with chatter and laughter. We were handed drinks, and it wasn't long before we were told to help ourselves from the barbecue table. Well, we sat down with our food in the restaurant, and Dave, our guide, who had also become our friend, made sure that he was seated next to us. For everyone's entertainment, they'd provided a cabaret, and whilst we were still eating, a man wearing a dinner suit and a woman who was scantily dressed and wearing fishnet tights came onto the stage and began to do a song and dance routine to backing tapes. I felt more and more out of place, and I dreaded being called up to sing. But it wasn't long before the feared announcement came that a special guest had come from Manchester to sing, and I was invited up to the stage. I mustered all the boldness I could, and I walked forward, looking as confident as possible, hoping and praying that none of my embarrassment and inadequacy showed. I expressed my thanks to the manager for inviting me to sing, and had told the audience that he'd requested Amazing Grace, a song which was particularly dear to me as, being a Christian, I understood what grace was all about. Maurice and I had prayed a lot about this evening, and we'd asked God to turn this foolishness into something that would glorify him. Before now, there had been constant hubbub of noise as people chatted over their meals. But once I began to sing, I noticed a hush fall upon them, and I was amazed to see that all the knives and forks and the glasses were put down, and every head turned towards me. Even the people who were out on the balcony became quiet and looked in through the windows as they listened intently to the song. Well, seeing their response made me pray more fervently inside that God would use me. He would use this very occasion for his glory. And I put my whole heart and soul into the song. Well, at the end of the song, there was total silence for about 5 seconds. And then, to my amazement, the audience began to clap and they all rushed towards me and people began to hug me and kiss me. I was totally bewildered by this response, as obviously it had never happened before. Then there were shouts from all over the restaurant that I should sing another song. So, given this cue, I spoke to them for about 10 minutes concerning the things that God had done in my life. And then I sang a song with the message, if I'd known yesterday the things I know today, a lot of things I'd not have done. Well, I finished my song and I left the stage to a roar of applause and people patted me on the back as I returned to my seat next to Maurice. I was absolutely overwhelmed by their reaction, and I knew without a shadow of a doubt that God had touched these ungodly people. But what followed was even more amazing. Maurice and I continued our meal, and one by one people began to tap Maurice on the shoulder and ask if they could have a word with him. There had been no mention of who Maurice was. As far as people were concerned, he was just my partner. But they talked specifically with him and came out with all manner of confessions, begging Maurice to put a few words into God on their behalf. Well, as I sat back watching these things happening, it appeared as if a revival had broken out, and I couldn't believe that God had been so gracious in such an ungodly atmosphere. The manager was absolutely over the moon at the success of the evening and was loath to let the night finish. He took his staff, Maurice and myself and a few others, to an all-night cafe where we could get tea, coffee, alcoholic drinks and food as he desired us to continue our get-together. In his exuberance, he began to get a bit over-friendly and familiar with me, and I had to extricate myself from his grip on a number of occasions. I didn't want to judge him too harshly, as I could see that he'd, quite a bit to drink and probably didn't realise what he was doing. However, Maurice and I knew that our job had been done, and now we just wanted to go back to our apartment. We persuaded our friend Dave to let us go, and he called for a taxi for us. As we were leaving, the manager came rushing over and begged us to allow him to take us for a meal the following evening to show his appreciation for what we had done that night. He arranged to meet us at a little cafe where he would collect us and take us to what, in his opinion, was the best restaurant on the island. So, after saying our farewells, we finally left in a bemused state at what God had done that night. As arranged, Maurice and I sat in the coffee drinking coffee the next day whilst we waited for the manager to show up. The time appointed came, and it went, and yet there was no sign of him. Just as we were about to leave the cafe, Dave, our friend from the timeshare resort, entered and came over to our table. He sat down with us and poured out an amazing story. Apparently, for some time now, the manager had been a source of embarrassment to the staff because he was in the habit of drinking heavily and seducing the female customers. Up until now, they'd tried to ignore his behaviour, but after witnessing his total lack of respect towards myself the previous evening, they were incensed, for in their opinion, I was a good girl and totally different to the others. That very morning, the staff had all got together and unanimously made the decision to request head office to dismiss their manager, saying they'd no longer work for him because they had totally lost their respect. They faxed their head office with this request, and within a matter of minutes, the answer came back that their request had been granted and the manager was sacked. Dave was full of apologies for the treatment I had received the previous night and begged that I would try to forget it. As Maurice and I walked back to our apartment that evening, we couldn't help but reflect on how the mighty had fallen. The man who had once been an Elim minister had backslidden so much that he had become a drunken womanizer, despised not only by Christians, but also by the world. Take note of this. If the salt has lost its savour, it's fit for nothing but to be cast out and trodden under the foot of men. Make sure you carry the season. God bless you.